There are some people you can spend time with and feel completely fine afterward. And then there are others, people who don't necessarily do anything wrong, nothing obvious, no conflict, no clear reason. But after being around them, something feels different inside you. Like your attention feels heavier, like your thoughts take longer to settle, like you need a bit of time alone afterward, just to return to yourself. The strange part is, it's not always easy to explain why that happens. Because from the outside, the interaction might look completely normal. Sometimes it starts very subtly. A conversation that requires a bit more effort than usual. A need to stay slightly more alert while responding. A sense that you are adjusting yourself without fully noticing it. Not in a forced way, more like small internal corrections happening in the background. How you speak, how you react, how much of yourself you're allowing into the moment. And over time, those small adjustments add up. There's something important happening underneath all of that. When you're with certain people, your mind stays more outward facing. You're tracking reactions, you're reading tone, you're staying aware of how you're being received. Even if everything looks calm on the surface, your attention is doing more work than usual. Attention is not neutral. It has a cost. That cost isn't always immediate. You don't always feel it in the moment. Sometimes it shows up after, when the interaction ends and everything becomes quiet again. That's when your mind stops managing the moment and starts processing what just happened. And that is something you notice. The slight mental fatigue, the quiet drop in energy, and the need for space. It's easy to assume that means something is wrong with you, or something went wrong in the interaction. But often it's simpler than that. Some environments just require more internal effort to navigate, not because they're bad, just because they demand more attention than others. And attention, when stretched too often, doesn't always feel like exhaustion immediately. It can feel like irritation, maybe mental clutter, or a sense that you're slightly off without knowing why. You might even find yourself replaying parts of the conversation later, not because of something significant, but because your mind is trying to close loops that stayed slightly open while you were there. There's also another layer to this. Sometimes it's not just about the other person, it's about who you become around them. Because different people bring out different versions of your attention. With some, you relax into yourself. With others, you become more monitored internally, more aware of how you're coming across, more careful with what you say, more adjusted than usual. And that version of you takes more energy to maintain. There is a quiet shift that happens when you step away. You might notice it in small ways first. A deeper breath without thinking about it. A slight drop in mental tension. A return of thoughts that feel more like your own again. I just feel like space returning. And over time, you start recognizing patterns. There are people who leave you feeling expanded, and others who leave you feeling compressed. Neither always means good or bad, but the difference is real, and your system notices it before you do consciously. The interesting part is it's not always about personality. Sometimes it's about pace. Sometimes it's about emotional demand. Sometimes it's about how much you have to hold internally just to stay engaged. And you don't always realize how much you're holding until you're no longer holding it. That's when clarity usually shows up. After the interaction, when things are quiet again and your mind finally has space to register. you start to see it more clearly. Which connections feel light, which ones feel heavy, which ones require you to shrink parts of yourself slightly just to stay in them. This is not about withdrawing from people. It's more like noticing the difference between a connection that feels natural and another that requires constant adjustments. Because one leaves you with more of yourself intact. The other slowly takes small pieces of attention without you realizing. And once you start noticing that difference, you can't really unsee it. You become more aware of what certain interactions are doing to your internal state. So when you feel drained around certain people, sometimes it means you were paying more attention than you realized. And your mind is finally giving you the signal that it's time to come back inward for a while. And that return to your own thoughts, your own pace, your own quiet is usually where things start to settle again. I'll see you in the next Quiet Echo.